fleeing persecution, making a treacherous journey, risking their lives, not knowing where they're going, but hoping for something more. Living in temporary camps, constantly moving. This is the story of the Exodus, a story we continue to read about in this week's Torah portion. It's the foundational story of our people. From this, we are commanded not just once, but 36 times to take care of the stranger. The story of the refugee is a story that each Jew takes personally. We all know too well the need to flee. On April 23rd, 1945, the Third Army of the United States of America liberated my grandfather from Auschwitz. In the DP camps, he met my grandmother. They had nowhere left to go home to. They were brought here by HIAS. I have here their HIAS immigration papers. I'm going to read it to you. In accordance with the corporate affidavit submitted on February 21st, 1946 by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society to the Department of Justice Commissioner of Immigration and Naturalization and accepted by him, and in accordance with this power invested in me by the Board of Directors, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, I, Louis Neckrug, Director General of HIAS Operations Europe, do hereby certify that Yitzhak Greengrass is a person for whom HIAS assumes the responsibility in accordance with terms and conditions set forth in the corporate affidavit submitted and accepted. I herewith guarantee visa fees and travel expenses to the United States for the above name in connection with his immigration to the United States. Tonight, I am honored to be able to introduce to you Mark Hetfield, the President and CEO of HIAS. He has led the transformation of the organization from one focused solely on Jewish immigrants to a global agency that assists refugees of all faiths and ethnicities, and is a major implementing partner of the United Nations Refugee Agency and the United States Department of State. As an expert in refugee and immigration law, policy, and programs, Mark's 25-year career began at HIAS in Rome and has included 5 positions at HIAS, as well as a post with the Immigration and Naturalization Service in DC and Haiti. As the Senior Advisor on Refugee Issues at the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, he directed the most comprehensive study on expedited removal to date. Mark's dedication to protect all who flee ethnic cleansing, violence, and other forms of persecution has made HIAS the preeminent voice of American Jewish community on refugee and immigration issues. And so, on behalf of my family and the thousands upon thousands that HIAS has helped, I thank you and I invite you to come and share with us this evening.
Shabbat Shalom. Before that wonderful introduction, how many people in here had heard of HIAS before? Okay, that's okay, about a third. We are your refugee agency. We're the American Jewish community's only global refugee agency. And many of you may not realize it, but your parents or grandparents were probably helped by HIAS in one way or another. The reason I'm here in Miami today is because I'm on my way to Cuba, not for work, but for a vacation. I'm biking across Cuba, and I'm leaving tomorrow. But the interesting part of the story that's relevant to tonight and relevant to what I'm talking about, it's about a person who's going there with me, who is kind of a metaphor for the transformation that HIAS has gone through over the last 20 years. And that person is Manny Lindenbaum. Manny is a 83-year-old Kindertransport survivor, and he's going to Cuba with me along with a group of other friends and family. Now, Manny was born in 1931 in Unna, Germany, and he had an older brother and an older sister, and they grew up thinking themselves as being as German as they thought of themselves as being Jewish. They had more German friends than Jewish friends. Their father, Manny's father, owned a business, owned a store in Unna, and did pretty well. Again, they felt that they were Germans. But then in 1937, things started to change. And Manny's brother, Siegfried, was getting beaten up daily at school. Their mother would complain to the principal. The principal said there's nothing that he could do about it. The business started to get boycotted. The store got boycotted. And they had a harder and harder time getting by. And then finally, on October 28th, 1938, on Shabbat, they were rounded up and deported to Poland. Even though all of them were born in Germany, they were of Polish descent. They were denaturalized by the Nazis, put on a train, and deported to Zbaszyn, Poland. In Poland, they saw that they and the many other refugees that were with them from Germany saw that the German troops were massing along the Polish border. They realized an invasion was imminent and that they had to get further north into Poland. And while they were doing that, there was an announcement that the Kindertransport, the operation that was bringing German Jewish children to England, had room for some more people, some more children. And so when this announcement was made, and there was a man who said that he was taking kids who wanted to go on the Kindertransport, Manny's mother shoved Manny and shoved Manny's sister, Ruth, and Manny's brother, Siegfried, in the direction of this man who said that he was going to take the kids to the Kindertransport. Manny saw another friend of his, who was about the same age, also about 7, 8 years old, get shoved by his mother over to the same man who was going to take his friend to the Kindertransport. But the kid cried and cried and cried, and the mother felt bad, so she took her son back, and Manny found out that later both of them perished in Auschwitz. But Manny's mother did not even look at Manny after she shoved him. She looked away and walked away, and Manny said he really was never able to forgive his mother for that. He, Siegfried, and Ruth made it to the port, but Ruth, the older sister, was 14, so she was not allowed to get on that boat. She was told she was too old. She was reunited with her parents in Auschwitz. All 3 of them were killed there. But Manny and his brother made it to England, and then ultimately, with the help of HIAS, made it to New Jersey, where he was resettled and reunited with his aunt and uncle. And Manny, like so many Holocaust survivors, and his brother Siegfried could not talk about what they had gone through, even with each other, for many, many decades. Finally, after his kids were already grown, and when Siegfried was sick and dying in the 1980s, Manny finally came to terms with what he had been through and started to talk about it, started to go around and give lectures on tolerance, on the Holocaust, on what he had survived, on bullying, and ultimately, 2 years ago, he decided to ride a bicycle to retrace his refugee journey backwards from Poland into Germany, crossing the Polish-German border on World Refugee Day, to raise money for HIAS programs in Chad, helping Darfuri refugees who had also fled a genocide, many of whom had lost loved ones along the way, just as Manny had. And Manny did it all he says, for his parents and for his sister Ruth. This year, Manny lit the Hanukkah at the White House at the White House Hanukkah party. And with President Obama. And when he mentioned to me at the party that he was going to Cuba to ride his bicycle again, I invited myself to come along. So that's why I'm here in Miami. But the Kindertransport operation gets talked about a lot. It saved thousands of lives, but it wasn't really a great thing in many ways, because what it did was it separated children from their families. It basically created orphans. It would have been a lot better if these kids had been allowed to bring their parents over. Instead, their parents perished while the kids survived. And in today, you see parallels in today's refugee crisis. Why weren't the parents allowed to come over? The parents weren't allowed to come over, and we forget this, but the parents weren't allowed to come over because A, it was felt that they would be a burden on this country or on the United Kingdom, and B, there was a perception that German Jews were actually security threats to the United States or to England. After all, they were Germans, so they could have had allegiances to the Nazis, and even if they weren't Nazis, even if they weren't sympathetic to Nazis, everybody knows that Jews tend to be a little bit radical, and they may have been radicals, they may have been communists. That was another reason to keep them out. And even if they weren't Nazis, and even if they weren't radicals or communists, they had family back there in Germany, and they had family back there in Europe, and they were therefore susceptible to blackmail. And that made them a security risk. So we forget. We think that, our ancestors came here, but they didn't pose security risks the way that some people think refugees today do, but the perception was, in fact, that we did. That perception was wrong, but it wasn't crazy. And it's what we're seeing today. And that's what's really been heartbreaking for us at HIAS. I mean, HIAS has seen this, again, happen to our own people during what I call our Exodus period. During the first 120 years of HIAS's history, HIAS helped hundreds of thousands of Jews come to safety and freedom. But now we're in our Leviticus period. Now HIAS is not helping refugees because they are Jewish. HIAS is helping refugees because we are Jewish. And this includes refugees who are from Syria. HIAS has been doing work on behalf of the American Jewish community in the 21st century, again, helping people not because they're Jewish, but because we are. And the problem is that we're doing this work on your behalf. We're doing this work on behalf of American Jews. The United Nations sees HIAS as being their refugee partner. That's their Jewish partner, helping refugees. The State Department also sees us as being their American Jewish partner, helping refugees. But American Jews had no idea what we were doing on their behalf. This all changed on September 3rd of this year, when the photograph of Aylan Kurdi, the little Syrian boy whose lifeless body was photographed on the beach in Turkey after his family failed to succeed in crossing the Mediterranean to Greece. That woke up our community, and it woke up many communities as to just how horrific the Syrian refugee crisis has gotten. It's not a new crisis. The crisis didn't start in September of last year. It started 5 years ago, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and no one paid attention. The international community paid very little attention. The only countries that really noticed were the ones that were neighboring Syria: Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, which took more and more and more refugees until they were beyond their saturation points. And refugees knew this, so they then went to Europe. 2011, for example, Lebanon had 10,000 refugees in the entire country. 2012, 135,000. 2013, 856,000. 2014, 1.1 million. And then 2015, it's believed that the number hit nearly 1.8 million refugees in a country of about 5 million people. It's an overwhelming crisis, and we're fortunate here, by virtue of our geographic isolation, that we aren't really affected by it. But as Europe learned, you can't really ignore what's going on halfway around the world when the crisis is that big. Europe learned that, and the United States, as part of the international community, has a responsibility to pitch in as well. We got a lot of support after September 2nd from the Jewish community. Many rabbis talked about us during the high holidays. We got 5,000 new donors in September alone to support our resettlement work. And we basically got a lot of support. Lots of synagogues, lots of Jewish families were calling us, asking how they can support Syrian refugees. Can they bring them into their houses? Can they adopt them? Can they sponsor them? But then Friday, November 13th happened. And that very warm welcome that we heard throughout the United States among many communities for Syrian refugees turned very suddenly after the attacks in Paris, when refugees were scapegoated as being the perpetrators of those attacks, when in fact, not a single refugee was implicated in any of the attacks in Paris on November 13th. They were all radicalized Europeans. They were all people who could get on a plane and come to the United States without a visa. But refugees are subject to 18 to 24 months of vetting before they can come here. Before a Syrian refugee comes to the United States, they have interviewed him multiple times. They have run his name, birthday, and fingerprints by over a dozen intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies and Interpol. The UNHCR has even scanned their irises. They've made them construct family trees explaining every relative that they have, going up 2 generations and sideways. Refugees are scrutinized and vetted really to a fault. But still, they got scapegoated. And within a matter of weeks, within a matter of days actually, 31 governors declared their states off limits for Syrian refugees, or at least for Syrian Muslim refugees. It was a real hardening of hearts throughout the country during that period when refugees were wrongfully scapegoated. And again, security is not a new issue for refugees. It was an issue for our parents and grandparents. It was a reason to keep them out. And it's an excuse for keeping Syrian refugees out here, even though they are not bringing terror, they're trying to get away from it. Now, I spent yesterday in Pittsburgh, where we have a very good resettlement site. Pittsburgh Jewish Family Service resettles refugees for us, and they've done the same kind of transition that HIAS has done. And I went to visit 2 Syrian Muslim families that the Jewish Family Service of Pittsburgh had resettled. And I asked them, I said, wasn't it strange for you to get off the plane and you were greeted at the airport by the Jewish Family Service? And the Jewish Family Service got you your apartment, got your kids in school, has been there to help you learn English. How does that feel? And they said, when they were in school in Syria, they learned all sorts of bad things about Jews. They were taught that Jews are bad people that do bad things. And now they see that everything they taught was wrong. Everything they were taught was wrong. That it's Jews that are helping them, that it's Jews who are on call for them morning, noon, and night when they need something, and who come over to help them, that it's Jews who are helping their children adjust to a new life in the United States. And this is really what HIAS is all about. You know, it's about welcoming refugees the way that we were welcomed, or the way that we wish we had been welcomed. But it's also about building bridges. It's also about empathy. It's also about letting refugees know that we were once like them, and that we are there for them. And I just want to note one other thing. My colleague here, Katya Moroz, is here. She's studying at the University of Miami right now, getting her LLM as a Muskie Fellow. But she was in our Ukraine office in Kiev, which also underwent a similar transformation. Our office in Kiev was established to help Jews who were leaving the Soviet Union, which is also when I got my start at HIAS. That's what I was doing. But today, it's helping hundreds of thousands of internally displaced persons from Ukraine who are victims of the Russian aggression in the East, and is trying to help them be safe where they are, trying to help them establish new homes to the places that they have fled to. And again, we're doing this not because they're Jewish, but because we are. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.